Okay, guys, it's time again for the Blue White Breakdown podcast. I'm Bob Flounders, joined in State College by Daniel Gallen. Dave Jones and I chatted with you guys a little bit earlier in the week. I don't know. I don't know if the video came out, so you guys might have missed the crazy games he was playing with his dog Kaiser at the end of the podcast. But it's not such a bad thing. He was trashing my Cowboys, so he's on the list right now, Daniel. He's on the list. But let's talk about some Penn State stuff. We'll talk about the new strength coach. Penn Staters left in the NFL. Our thoughts on the January enrollees, and then I think we should get into a little bit about some recent updated mock drafts because Penn Staters are playing a role in both of them. One by Dane Brugler of The Athletic, and then the other one from the OG Mel Kiper has, I think, his initial. Mel is terrible at mock drafts. I respect the work ethic, but when it comes to mock drafts, I just don't think he's that great. So we'll see. We will see because he has a surprise Penn Stater in his mock first round draft. So hopefully he got this one right. That's a little tease. But Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Bob. Me and Mel Kiper are both Baltimore area Catholic school graduates. So I gotta, even though he went to Calvert Hall, I still gotta put up some defense for my our local ties right there.
I do. I can remember when I was actually in college. I think even in high school, maybe that's how old I am. He was he was the original guy, and I really respect him because I don't think there's any question. He puts the work in. I mean, and it's not easy for him. He kind of got his start. He didn't really have much of an NFL background, but man, he stuck to it. And now I think everyone appreciates Mel Kiper. I know that I do. There's Frank Caliendo impersonates him, but I just don't know when it comes to the first round. He might be better in the middle rounds, but I'm not sure about some of his first round picks. Also, you guys both have something in common. You both have great hair in your own ways. I think you both have great hair. So we can start the conversation there with things that you have in common, along with football knowledge and Penn State knowledge, but also great hair. So that's at least three things. But let's talk about Penn State's new strength coach, the guy with the incredible, is that a handlebar mustache? I don't know what you call a Snidely Whiplash mustache. Chuck Losey is replacing Dwight Galt. He's been at Penn State ever since James Franklin's been at Penn State. I think he came along with Dwight Galt. I think he also worked with Dwight when they were at Vanderbilt together. And I think he was also a very good player at Vanderbilt about 20 years ago. He played defensive end. But I think we talked about it last week. Just, when you make a change like this, how significant is it? Do we think he has a lot of Dwight's core beliefs? Do you think we're going to see some things different? What do we know about Losey?
Yeah, I think that the big thing that you look at is the continuity that this keeps. Obviously, the strength coach is a very, very important position within the program. And that goes beyond just kind of the general like strength and conditioning, the off-season workouts and stuff. The way that college football is set up, the strength coach has the most access to the players during the off-season, a lot more than the coaches can do right now. So the strength coach is kind of in charge of setting that tone, in charge of really instituting, I guess, the vision in a couple of different ways at this point in the college football calendar. So I think that given what Dwight Galt had kind of built at Penn State and with James Franklin dating back to Vanderbilt, I think this move makes a lot of sense in kind of keeping what they've been doing going. Obviously, Chuck Losey is someone who's going to put his own stamp on this. He's someone that, he's worked with Galt and James Franklin since 2011. So he's been here the whole time, and he probably has his own ideas on how things can go. And now he'll get the chance to kind of put his stamp on the program. So I think that's a move that makes a lot of sense. I would have been a lot more surprised if they'd gone outside of the program to make that replacement. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that you just kind of want to keep doing what you've been doing, figure out how to maybe improve on some of those offensive linemen, that kind of development. But yeah, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you just said that at the end, because I think the Penn State fan base is probably like, well, it's great to have continuity, but when you're getting pushed around at the line of scrimmage on the offensive line, maybe they need to try some different things. And I'm hopeful that maybe they will tweak some things, because I just thought consistency wise, you just can't put it all on the running backs underperforming. I just think that there weren't that many holes. James has said that, a really good running back's got to be able to make one guy miss in the hole to make a 4-yard gain, a 25-yard gain or whatever. And that might be true. But when it's 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, I mean, you have to feel a little bit better about giving the ball to a running back and converting that situation rather than punting. And I just think that over time, Penn State fans and even us in the media, when it's 3rd and short, it's too dicey of a proposition when it should be more of a slam dunk.
Yeah, exactly. And with anything offensive line play, I'm always very, very deferential to the people that know a lot more than me.
Sure,
I have no idea kind of what needs to change, what needs to look different. But I think that even just from a personnel perspective, we know that unit is going to look a lot different next season. And so this is kind of the time where will Olu Fashanu, as he goes into this offseason, how will he look different coming out? Yeah. And a lot of those other kind of redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores, that kind of age group.
Daniel, is there anything else you've been able to glean since the announcement that Losi was going to be the guy? Have you learned anything else about him, or is it really just too soon? Because, I mean, I don't think there's never been like a Chuck Lose media availability. So we just don't even know. We can't really describe his personality. Dwight Galt was kind of like I don't know if it was a father figure, but he was at the point in his life where he was almost like a grandfather figure, I think, at that program. Always looked forward to he would always have like a Zoom call or in person before the pandemic. He would meet with the media up there. We'd get to see them go through one of their last strength and conditioning workouts of the winter. And then he would be available. And it was always interesting because he always knew we wanted to know who are the fresh faces, who did well, and he would give us all kinds of information. A lot of it turned out to be really, really prophetic, but I just wonder if maybe that's going to continue at Penn State.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that that's kind of part of the continuity, and I think that James Franklin knows that having everyone's measurements up on the board, which I believe was started by Bill O'Brien, and kind of having this opening this up a little bit is a good recruiting tool, especially when you see at Pro Day, the Combine, you see the numbers that those guys put up, and this is kind of a little window into that I feel like you don't often get. So I think that it's something that it's a great recruiting tool, and it's a little bit of transparency in a game, in an industry where you don't often get that.
Okay, Daniel, let's move it along. Let's talk about the new faces in town, the new faces on the Penn State roster. It has been updated. I don't know how accurate the heights and weights are, but I think the 9 January enrollees and Mitchell Tinsley, the wideout from Western Kentucky who transferred into the program, they're on the roster. So as far as I know, they're able to take part in the winter conditioning and hopefully the spring drills. Let's play a little game. I'll let you go first. Give me 1 or 2 guys that you are really we're not talking about the fans, just you. You're really kind of anxious to see how they do, whether it's based upon immediate impact or, just a supremely talented player. Everyone loves the quarterbacks, but if you had to pick 1 or 2 guys to watch of the new additions, who would they be?
I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path on this one.
Don't take my guy. Do not take my guys.
I'm going to go with Omari Evans, the wide receiver from Texas. He was
writing this one down.
Three-star recruit. He committed, I think, in October. I think it might have been before the Indiana game. He was someone that came up to Penn State, worked out, ran in the 4.3s, which is something that you can't really teach. Can't teach that kind of speed. Right. And I think that it's something where he's just an intriguing prospect. He was a high school quarterback in a run-heavy offense. If you look at his highlight tape, it's a lot of him taking a snap, faking a handoff, making a couple guys miss and going. So I'm really interested to see how that kind of translates to Penn State and what kind of development needs to happen there. Obviously, Penn State this year didn't necessarily have that kind of pure vertical threat on the outside, the guy that you can just put out there for 10, 15 plays a game. He runs straight, takes a safety and a corner with him and clears things out a little bit underneath. So I'm interested to see how he kind of transitions to the game, what he needs to do physically, and whether or not that speed is raw enough or can be refined enough to get him onto the field.
Okay, I like that pick a lot, man. Omari Evans. All right. I'm going to give two names. One of them I'm cheating because I just think that this is an important. I think the Tinsley kid is a huge addition for Penn State. And I think, as he gets more comfortable in the offense, and that's why I'm glad he's going to be in here. I'm assuming he's going to be able to work out in spring. Hopefully he is. I don't know how that works when you transfer in, but even if he doesn't get here till August, but he's already on the roster, so I'm assuming he's good for spring. I just think he's a guy that I think can really help Penn State. And much like Jahan Dotson, he's a guy that, throughout his career, he was, I think, a JUCO, and then he had 2 years at Western Kentucky, but every year he got better, and the jumps were usually pretty significant. And that's one of the things that really, really impressed me about Jahan Dotson is he never plateaued. As he led the Big Ten in receiving yards in 2020, and then I think he had 884 in 9 games, and he had some really big games against good defenses. But he still got better. He still found a way to improve his game. I'm hoping this guy is the same way. And I do think, as much as it's great to have Parker Washington, have either the 1 or the 2 role again this year, and Keandre Lambert-Smith, obviously, I think has some talent. I just don't know how close the rest of those guys are to being, hey, I have your sister's trust. I have Sean Clifford's trust. As much as for a guy who hasn't done much, and I'm guilty of it, Malik Mega, has gotten a lot of praise, right? And he could certainly run. He's certainly big enough, but I think you saw it in the Outback Bowl. There were times when he was on the field where he didn't get lined up right. And I think they might have had to call a timeout once or twice just because they wanted to play fast. They couldn't. It looked like he was struggling. He wasn't on the right side of the field. It's definitely a big offseason for him. But I think that this Tinsley guy can really, really fortify a position. I think Penn State could really feel a lot better about their wideouts if he can be anywhere near as good as he was at Western Kentucky. Not the same type of defense he'll be seeing in the Big Ten, but he did have a big game against Michigan State. I think he also did some damage to Indiana. The other guy for me, obviously, is Singleton. You look at the running back room now, and it's Kevon Lee, and I think a lot of people feel good about him. I don't know what to make. I just don't know what to make of Devin Ford. I know Katron Allen is also a tremendous talent, but I just think that Singleton is a guy that Penn State is going to play 2 or 3 backs in a game in the fall. They just are. It takes them forever to decide on a guy, even if he looks like he's the best running back on the field. So I think there's a chance for one of these 2 running backs to be, if not both of them, in the running back rotation. And as much as I've heard great things about Singleton, boy, if that translates at Penn State, I think that can help the offensive line too.
Definitely. I think those are both good choices. And I think Tinsley is really important. Me and Dustin talked about this last week, where Penn State never had a number 4 wide receiver in 2021.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, Malik Mega was being talked about like a number 4, but we didn't actually see it on the field. And I think that having Tinsley in, it gives you a solid top 3. And then Mega or Caden Saunders, another early enrollee,
right,
who probably has I think one of the best chances to play early along with Singleton. Saunders and Mega can kind of compete for that number 4 spot and potentially even more time. So I think those are both pretty good choices. And I think that the understood answer to the premise of that question is obviously Drew Aller and Bo Prabula. So we'll see those guys when we see those guys. But I think that for most of the fan base, that's an understood answer to that question.
Daniel, is there any chance is there any chance the next time we get James Franklin on a Zoom call? Now, I'm assuming it might just be I guess it'll be a signing day press conference of February, maybe, but it's, the hay's in the barn there. I'm not even sure if that's the right time to ask him, but at the first availability for spring practice, is there any chance the first question isn't about the quarterback room and how he's going to approach spring drills?
I mean, I feel like that has to be the first one based on how we saw 2021 go.
Yeah. And I think that, I think he is aware of the fact that the fans are a little bit restless the way that they finished the season. Sean Clifford, certainly a tough guy, but he did not play well in the Outback Bowl. I know that he was missing Jahan Dotson, but man, I do think that people just want to know how they're going to approach it. Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't, I don't necessarily know that the fans will agree with it, but I kind of, knowing James a little bit, I think you and I know that, if the question is it going to be an open competition? I think he's going to figure out a way to answer around that, where there's always important to be there's always job openings. There's always open competition, but I just wonder, I'm just more curious what he's going to do with Sean Clifford in the spring. So we'll see, but I just hope that those young guys are out there a lot, and hopefully we'll be able to get up there a couple of times to watch them. So let's move it along here on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Daniel will be with Dustin Hockensmith. He mentioned Dustin a little bit earlier. They're going to be doing something a little bit later in the week. But let's talk a little bit. Let's move it along to the NFL, and it'll be a Penn State influence. So they're down to 8 teams. Who are, in your mind, who is the best or maybe the most important Penn State player still alive in the playoffs, with an eye towards maybe making a run either to the championship game or even the Super Bowl? I mean, there's a lot of deserving candidates, a lot of under the radar candidates. But Daniel, I know you've done some stuff with Penn Staters in the NFL this season. Who's the one or two guys that you think? You said you watched a lot of football this past weekend. Who are the guys you'll be watching this weekend?
I think when you look at the guys that are left, the one that I feel like is maybe one of the most important players to his team and has the chance, given his role, to make a lot of plays is Adrian Amos, the safety from the Packers. I believe, like Mel Kiper, he's also a Calvert Hall college alum. I'm going to have to...
He is. I think his dad was a cop. I remember the bio, but he's definitely from Baltimore.
I'm probably have to fact check myself on that. Yep, I was right. But yeah, I think that given that the Packers are going to play that San Francisco team that likes to run the ball a lot, likes to use someone like Deebo Samuel in space a ton, and even with George Kittle over the middle and further down the field, I think Adrian Amos is going to have a pretty long day. Pretty busy day, and we'll have the opportunity to make a lot of plays. And then on the other side of that matchup, it's the playoffs. All these games are, well, they're supposed to be close because it's supposed to be the playoffs. But I think when you look at this stage of the season, and given what the conditions might be like in Green Bay, I think you got to look at Robbie Gould, 49ers kicker.
Killed my Cowboys. Just killed them. Killed them.
It seems like the Packers and the Niners, almost every time they play, it comes down to something with a kicker at the end. So I think that Gould and Amos are going to be two big guys to watch in that game.
I love that I just think that Adrian Amos is, he's a guy, he wasn't even like that high of a pick by the Packers. I want to say he was maybe a 4th or 5th round pick. And
he started with the Bears.
Yeah, that's right, with the Bears. I'm sorry, but I think it was like a mid-round selection.
It says 5th rounder.
Yeah, and he was I think he played. It was at least a 3-year starter at Penn State. Could play corner or safety. Solid, just a solid player. Never really had to worry about him, and he played great with the Bears. And then he got some big money to play with the Packers. And he's a guy that I think is very deserving. I think he gets overlooked a lot when it comes to, Pro Bowls and stuff like that. But I think he is, right there with the top, 4, 5, 6 safeties because of his versatility. I really like him. I'm glad you mentioned him. He was on my list But a couple guys that I'm looking at, and I'm going to give Brian Baldinger a shout out. Do you follow those Baldy breakdowns on Twitter?
I see him when they get retweeted in by Eagles fans.
He had a good one he had a great one on a Penn State guy this morning. But I think the Tampa Bay offensive line's a little beat up. That Eagles game, I think Jensen the center and Wirfs the right tackle. I don't think the center finished the game. I think Wirfs tried to come back in, but struggled. I'm not sure how healthy they are. And they're going to go against the Rams team that's got Von Miller, and they do like to move Aaron Donald around. So Donovan Smith, I think, is a guy that's really – his role is always important, protected Tom Brady's blind side. But I think even more magnified this week, if Wirfs isn't 100%, I'm sure they're going to put Miller on that side. But he usually draws – the top edge guys, and I'm sure there's going to be some times maybe that Vaughn is matched against him, but he's a guy that's I would watch it. I also really think that I'm really impressed by what Ryan Bates has been able to do in developing his career since leaving Penn State. I think he originally I don't know if he was drafted a free agent by the Eagles.
Yeah, he was in
the Bills.
Yeah, he was an undrafted free agent in 2019. That was a year where I think you had Miles Sanders as a rookie, you had Sharif Miller, DeAndre
McGovern,
Tompkins was in there.
McGovern?
Yeah, he wasn't with the Eagles though. The Eagles had five. Yeah, they had the 5 Penn State guys in camp, and Bates was really, really impressive. But the Eagles had just built up so much offensive line depth that they traded him for Eli Harold, who was like a mid-20s, late 20s defensive end, and he didn't make the team out of camp. But I think that Bates has made the most of his opportunity, which is really neat to see. And especially given how the Eagles have kind of developed some of those other young guys that were in camp at the same time of him. It's a cool group.
I think he is starting now. I think with the Bills, if he's not, he's playing a lot. And that Bills offense, that's a dangerous team to watch. I think moving forward, if they beat the Chiefs, I think it's going to be the game that I'm most excited to see this weekend. I think if they beat the Chiefs, they're going to go to the Super Bowl. And he's played a big part of that. And just a shout out to Baldinger, because he did a nice little film breakdown on Kevin Givens, who played almost a starting role for the Niners. They moved him around inside and outside, and he gave Dallas's offensive line a lot of problems in that game. Dak, I think they said Dak was sacked 5 times. They couldn't run the ball. I think he was hit 14 other times, and he was just killing guys inside. He was killing them. Connor Williams I think he might have lost his job based upon what Kevin Givens did to him. And if you're going to rattle Aaron Rodgers, if Bosa plays, he should I think he'll get some time freed up in the middle to try and collapse that pocket. So I actually gave 3 Penn Staters, but Givens is another guy who's really come a long way and worked hard to get to this point. Nothing was really handed to him. Nothing was handed to Ryan Bates. So kudos to those guys. And I'll be watching all those guys and Adrian and unfortunately Robbie Gould this playoff season. So Daniel, let's wrap it up though with mock drafts, because they're starting to come fast and furious now. The NFL has, I think, established the top 24 picks, and they're going to continue to kind of establish it once the winners and losers are known. But your guy Mel Kiper and Dane Brugler both came out with mock drafts. Did you see Mel Kiper's mock draft?
Yep. Yeah, you can go to PennLive.com right now and read some analysis of both of these drafts.
So I was reading it, and I do love reading him. It was no surprise to me that he had Jahan Dotson in it, but when I saw he had in the teens Arnold Ebiketie going, and I think he had him going to the Eagles. Is that right?
Number 16 overall.
You know what? I wouldn't wait too long in this draft to take Arnold Ebiketie if I was an NFL team, because that guy was impressive for Penn State. I do think when you look at all of his tape, just the way he collapsed on the outside, the way that he beat guys inside, his strength, his hand movement, it might be a little early to take him there. But I mean, I think he is a legitimate top 30, top 35 player. And if a team falls in love with him, why not take it? Because those guys always go fast. That one surprised me. I hope Mel gets this one right. How about you?
Yeah, I was surprised to see Ebiketie that high. I mean, I kind of pegged him as a day two guy going into the draft. Obviously, when you go through the pre-draft workouts, he can definitely, most of these Penn State guys, we talked about it earlier, they all test well, and that helps bump up the stock a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that when you look at Ebiketie at that spot, I mean, the Eagles have a need at pass rusher. Derek Barnett probably won't be back after 5 years, their first round pick from 2017. And we saw that against the Bucks, there's no pressure on Tom Brady, except from the ghost of Ryan Kerrigan against one-legged Tristan Wirfs. I mean, that was the only production they had. So, I mean, the position makes sense, projecting the Eagles to take an edge rusher there. I was surprised to see Ebiketie there, but I think that we heard all this stuff in the spring before he even played about how, he's going to be great. He's going to be great. He backed it up on the field this year against some good competition. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised if he goes high and is a good player. But I think that, when you open those mock drafts, you got the guys in your head that you think you're going to see, you're going to see Dotson up there. We've seen Brisker in some first round mocks. And then I was like, oh, this is something different, something interesting.
Yeah. And Daniel, I think Arnold's, it's not just his athleticism for somebody that big, but his versatility. I think he could play. He's a hybrid defender, right? Everyone thinks of Jesse Luketa as a hybrid defender, and he was for Penn State. But Arnold could play with his hand on the ground. He could play. He showed he could play upright. I could see him making the conversion to outside linebacker in a 3-4. I really could, or I could see him in a 4-3. I don't know how much more weight you want to put on a guy like that, because his get off and his bend are so impressive. But I just think whoever gets him, and forget about what round it is. I do think he's a legitimate late first round talent, and I think he's going to play in the league if he stays healthy. I think we'll be talking about him on Blue White Breakdown podcast as an NFL player for years to come. I'm glad to see that. One more, Daniel, Dane Brugler's 2-round mock. Now, this one surprised me a lot because Jahan was in the first round. I think he was late in the first round. He had Ebiketie in the second. He had Brisker going to the Cowboys. And who makes a surprise appearance in the second round but Rasheed Walker? That one surprised me too. I'm a big fan of Rasheed, but I just didn't know. I unless they're that desperate for left tackles to take him that high, I think he's a guy that probably played himself into the third or fourth round this year just because of the position he plays. But to see him go in the second round, I just don't know if that speaks to maybe it's not a great draft class for left tackles or right tackles. But that one threw me a little bit.
Yeah, I think with the mock drafts, sometimes I take the kind of skimming approach where I open it and I go Command F and I type in Penn State, and then search for them. And so when I did that I read, I think the first half of the first round of Brugler's, and then Command F, and I saw that there were Penn State showed up 4 times. So in my head, I'm like, okay, one of these will be Dotson, one of these will be Brisker. I think I'd already seen the Kiper one, so I was like, okay, let's see where Ebiketie is. And I was like, I don't know who the 4th one is. This is a bit of a wild card. And I saw it, and I think from a Cincinnati Bengals perspective, that's who Dane Brugler has him going to. Makes sense. Got to protect Joe Burrow. Everyone thought that they were going to take Penei Sewell or an offensive lineman this year. They went with Jamar Chase, and worked out very nicely. But yeah, I mean, I think with Walker, he's one of those guys where there's going to be a very interesting marriage between the eye test, the measurables, and the potential that the NFL sees him at. I mean, I think that last year, if he'd come out, he could have been a decently high pick. And so I think that that's probably something, how much stock are evaluators putting into this year? He didn't play those last couple of games. He was on crutches. We don't know when exactly that happens. I mean, did it happen in the Michigan game? Did it happen before the Michigan game? Because that isn't exactly his best tape. And so I think that it'll be he's going to be an interesting case because he's one of those guys where he plays a premium position. He has kind of the pedigree as a very high recruit. He has a lot of experience. and he's going to have the measurables. And so how do you square that with what he did on the field last year?
Yeah, Daniel, I think in a lot of ways he's very similar to Donovan Smith. Donovan Smith left school a year early, and I didn't think his last year at Penn State. I think that it might have been 14. It was, because I think he went in the 15 draft. He went in the second round to the Bucks, but I didn't think his 2014 season, that was James's first year. I thought it was just okay. But I mean, you look at him, you look at the athleticism, and you see he did some good things earlier, I think, in his Penn State career. And it could just be that there just aren't that many slam dunk left tackle prospects. And at some point you got to decide when do you want to pull the trigger. But he's definitely a guy that I could see playing better at the next level. But he's also a guy that it's very concerning, kind of how he looked for the majority of 2021. And maybe there is a backstory that we don't know about, and maybe that'll come out. But and one more thing, I'm still banging the table for Brandon Smith to go in the top 2 rounds. I don't care what anyone else says. I don't think he will last into round 3. And if somebody gets him in round 3, look out. That's going to be a nice little game changer. Penn State fans are still mad at him for some missed tackles. I just think you forget about the other 98.5% of his snaps. I think I'm right on this one, but we'll see if he can kind of sneak himself into the second round. Anything else, Daniel, for this White Breakdown podcast?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that Brandon Smith point. I think after Pro Day, after the Combine, when Dane Brugler when he does another 2-round mock draft, it would not be a surprise to see Brandon Smith in the 50s, in the 40s, maybe even in the 30s. I think that's, and it's one of those things where NFL evaluators are looking at things differently than you or I or Penn State fans. So it's always a fun kind of exercise to try to figure out what people are actually seeing.
Daniel, before I let you go, it's the round of, there's only 8 teams left, the Elite 8. Can I put you on the spot? Who wins the Super Bowl? Or are you not prepared to make your pick?
I think that the most likely outcome is going to be the Packers losing in the NFC Championship game in some sort of heartbreaking fashion.
Okay, so that's not necessarily a Super Bowl pick, but I'll take it. I think the Bills are going to go. I'm going out on a limb. I think the Bills are going to win the Super Bowl. That's my pick.
I want a Bengals-Bills AFC Championship game, and then I also want I'd like to see Packers Bucks again. I think that's what I want to see in the Final Four, and then I think that we know where my allegiance.
I'm going to have to wait to the Super Bowl to get your Super Bowl pick, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to wait. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. All right, you better get it right, because I'm picking out of 8 teams. You're going to be picking out of 2, so you cannot afford to get it wrong.
Nope.
All right, Daniel will be back with Dustin Hockensmith later this week on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Thanks for listening. Daniel and I will be back around the middle of next week, and who knows what we're going to talk about.